Okay, cool. Well, thanks everyone. This is always fun to have people join in on this, so we're not talking to ourselves. Yeah, so we're just going to talk about kind of what happened this week, what some of the experts think about, think is going to happen as far as rates, what the market is going to do, relying heavily on, other experts, and I'll kind of add my commentary for what it's worth. And then at the end, as we usually do, we'll just kind of talk about, what does all this actually mean for you and your business and your clients? Okay, so the Fed funds rate. I was just talking to someone yesterday that was like, I don't know if now's a good time to buy because the Fed just raised rates again. And so I had to explain that's not mortgage rates. So again, just a quick overview. The Fed funds rate is the rate that commercial banks lend to each other overnight. It's not mortgage rates. It does have an impact on mortgage rates, but not directly. And it's set by a committee that meets 8 times a year. They're trying to curb inflation, promote economic growth. And they met yesterday, or no, it was Wednesday. Well, Tuesday and Wednesday, and they released findings Wednesday. So, and mortgage rates always act in anticipation of what that's going to do. And we'll talk about kind of the reaction here in a second. So as a reminder, kind of what's happened with the Fed funds rate, or what happened this week. So they did raise by 25 basis points to a target range between 4.5, 4.75. That's the highest since 2007, which is pretty crazy. Fed Chair Powell, some interesting things he said. He said a couple more rate hikes would probably get to the appropriately restrictive level necessary to bring down inflation. So they're really walking this wire of trying to slow economic growth without plunging us into a recession.
And Tyson,
yeah.
Are you, because I noticed some things that happened this morning. Do you want me to make a comment on that, or is that kind of part of?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what's interesting is that rates got actually quite a bit better after that Wednesday afternoon and then yesterday. So luckily I had a buyer go under contract yesterday and we got them locked in, because this morning rates got worse, probably about 1/8%, maybe a little bit more. And again, that's what rates do. They don't go directly this way and they don't go directly this way, right? This could be a one-day blip. But what happened this morning is that unemployment went down to the lowest level since 1969, and they expected it to go up a tick. So that in and of itself is really alarming to the feds, because that means that inflation is not in check yet, right? If we have a super low unemployment, it's going to push wages higher. It's going to push the cost of goods higher. It's going to make inflation keep going up. And that's what they're trying to control. Now, this is just one measure, right? And that's really the holiday season, which is also a lot of temporary hires and stuff like that. So again, it's a blip, but we had 2 really good days of what mortgage rates going down, and then we had, whoa, here we go, we're up a little bit. And so it's never one direction, even though the feds kind of do, right, one direction, and then they're going to hold steady and then they start coming down. That's not how mortgage rates work. So just my thought of what happened today.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah, and everything's very hair trigger right now. It's very volatile. It hasn't been like that historically, but now every little piece of news can send them one way or the other.
Freaking bipolar.
So Powell did keep it pretty vague, a couple more rate hikes, probably, using words like that. And then he did leave the door open to cutting rates before the end of the year. If, the wording was unexpectedly quickly, if inflation were to decline unexpectedly quickly, which is saying they're not really expecting that. But if it did, then we could see rate cuts by the end of the year. Okay, so this is kind of a brief history of what's been going on, where we've been at. So March 2022 was the first rate increase in a while after they pretty much cut the Fed rate to 0 during COVID. And then we got a 0.5% increase, and then we got 475 basis point increases through the rest of 2022. We ended, that should be December. It should be, sorry. Yeah, that 0.5% one should be December 2023. We ended the year with another 0.5%. And then this week, 0.25%. So this is kind of what I think based on his projections, maybe another 2 more quarter basis point increases or 25 basis points in March and May. And then I'm a hopeless optimistic, so I'm saying we will get a rate cut by the end of the year. For whatever.
And can I just say, in my 32 years, there's never been steps like this so drastically. And so that's why we saw the housing market, even though our economy in Utah is so strong, we saw really everybody just put the brakes on. And go back to my statement earlier, especially these big builders crapping their pants, right? But it is getting better. We are at the top of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The worst of it is in the rear view mirror.
Yeah. So what the Fed is doing will have an impact on will have an impact on mortgage rates, but also a lot of the other factors that contribute to mortgage rates. All right, so I have to show this because it's pretty hilarious. We did this meeting almost exactly a year ago, the same Zoom call, and this was my projection, but it was a lot of people's projection, right? So we were sitting at 3.625. We were thinking the peak would be about 4.25, and that would be down in the 3s again by the end of the year. So pretty funny, right? That of course did not happen. So what's interesting here, I'll show, this is what actually happened. So by February a year ago, we were already at 4%, so nearing what we thought was the peak. We hit 5% in April. We were right around 6% by the summer in June. And then we had this weird thing where it went down. And I don't know about you, Bliss, but I was thinking, oh, that was the peak. Like, here we go. We're on our way down. And then by September, we were back up at 6%, hit 7% in October. And then we are down around 6% again. So it's been kind of wild. And I don't think, from what I remember, I don't think there was a single expert, right, that predicted it to go this high.
And I actually just locked someone in yesterday at 5.625. So it depends on what loan program and stuff there are and what all that kind of stuff. But isn't that just the craziest roller coaster? And I don't know, some of you have been in the business longer than others, but this past year, it beat a lot of people up, just mentally, right? So I just am feeling so hopeful, right? We learned a lot. I think I even learned a lot about myself, and I've been doing this 32 years. I learned a lot about my business and how I want to run my business in the future, because I don't ever want to be caught unawares again, right? And so in hindsight, a little bit of trial is not always a hard thing, but let's just hope that we're definitely on the other side of it.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, that's just, I thought that was a good visual to see where we've been versus what we thought was going to happen. So, this is not very scientific the way I presented this. This is what actually happened again, and this is kind of, again, that trend. So a few takeaways as I was looking at this is, first, it happened so fast, right? And we got so much higher. But the trend is kind of correct. Like, we hit a peak. It was later in the year than we thought, but then it's trailing down. And that's kind of what we thought would happen. Now we're like almost double where we thought we would be by the end of the year. But anyway, I thought that was interesting, that even though it was much more extreme than anticipated, the trend was kind of what we expected. Okay, I've shown this before and it's actually out of date, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I want to show here is that there's historical precedence for mortgage rates in green here dropping when the Fed fund rate is steady. Okay, so back 2016 to 2017, then a little bit here, they dropped quite a bit while the Fed's even raised rates, right? And then here again, it's holding steady while mortgage rates are plummeting. So that's kind of what we're hoping for, is that after a couple more rate hikes by the Fed, they'll hold it steady throughout the majority of the year, and we will see mortgage rates come down. That's the hope. And there is, like I said, there's recent historical proof that can happen. Okay, now let's get to some predictions. So I looked up a bunch of, what big organizations and their chief economists are saying. And I thought this was really interesting. So Fannie and Freddie are pretty similar. They're thinking they're going to hang out in the mid sixes most of the year, but this low represents kind of what they think by the end of the year. So I thought that was interesting because we're kind of here now, right? Even a little bit lower in some cases. So, and these predictions are pretty recent. They were before the Fed meeting this week. So if they adjust these, then in future meetings, I'll definitely update this. But I think everyone's kind of hesitant making predictions. So this seems pretty conservative to me. Like basically, there may be some ups and downs, right?
Well,
Not
and
a
I
lot of
think
volatility.
because they missed the mark so drastically last year with their predictions, they want to look good this year. So I
Yeah.
actually think they're predicting higher than maybe they even feel because they got just slammed last year based on their predictions.
Yeah. So the Mortgage Bankers Association and the National Association of Realtors, again, pretty similar, well, pretty much exactly the same. So they do think we're going to end up in the low fives. And this is probably more in step with what I personally believe. And then realtor.com, for whatever this is worth, I just wanted to find an outlier. They think it's going to be much higher. They think we're headed back towards the sevens. But then again, by the end of the year, kind of coming down. And what I found interesting about this is I couldn't find a ton of reason why they thought that. So anyway, for whatever that's worth, that's kind of what these big chief economists of these big organizations think. And again, I probably fall somewhere in between here. I'd kind of actually be surprised if we got to the low fives by the end of the year. But I do think it will be in the fives. So again, take that for what it's worth.
Well, I agree with that for sure.
Okay. And then again, I've shown this again before, but just as a reminder, we're not going to talk about all these, but these are not even all of the things that affect mortgage interest rates. So the big ones are, or especially this year, are these consumer price indices that track inflation. And there's a bunch of them. There's like 4 big ones. 2 of them, the ones that they focus on a lot is no food and energy. Anyway, but yeah, there's just a reminder of all the many things. It's a very complicated thing, and every day certain reports and figures are released and rates act accordingly. They go up, they go down based on job openings reports, building reports, inflation, all these things. And again, I've used this analogy before, but our economy is like a cruise ship. It's not a speedboat, right? It takes, if you've ever been on a cruise, sometimes you don't even know you're turning, it's so slow, right? And then think of all the complexities in a cruise ship. You've got the food, the entertainment, the lodging, there's so many things interconnected on a cruise ship, and it turns and moves very slowly. And so one of the things that I'm really glad that the Fed is back down on their cuts, that they're not doing these giant, 75 basis point hikes anymore, because the economy is turning so slowly. I don't know that we've fully realized and seen the impact of those very first 75 point rate hikes. So yeah, just keep that in mind. The corrections are looking for, the actions may have already achieved that. We're just still turning. We're still trying to see that.
I just want to make sure we're not on the Titanic. Like just a cruise to the Caribbean sounds great.
Yes,
Maybe
yeah.
a little storm and now we're cruising. No
Right.
Titanic, please.
No
Yeah.
Titanic.
No hurricanes, no Titanic, no icebergs, just, just a little bit of waves, just a little bit of waves.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of what I want to talk about as far as interest rates and the Fed rate. So I wanted to get into the housing market outlook a little bit. And again, I've relied on this source for a long time, the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute at the U of U. At the beginning of every year, they do an economic report to the governor, and it's the Kempsey Gardner Institute and the Office of the Governor. It's a joint effort, and they put this together. And it's more than just housing. They talk about all the different economic impacts in Utah. But I'm just going to zero in on some of the housing from that report. But first, this was really interesting. So this is kind of their overall economic outlook for the state in the coming year. And they kind of narrowed it down to 3 plausible scenarios. So one is continuing growth. This is the norm for Utah. We've consistently grown 2 to 4% in GDP. That's gross domestic product. If you're not familiar with that, it's basically one of the most well-known indicators of economic growth in a state, a country. And so they're saying we could get back to this, normal status quo growth in Utah. We could see a shallow recession. And even so, in a lot of economies, states, cities, metro areas, they're in the excuse me, across the country, they are predicting a full-on recession. But they're saying pretty much the worst we could see in Utah is a shallow recession. So maybe a little bit of growth decrease, but up to even a little bit of increase. And then decelerating growth is the third option, where basically we hold steady or just on the low end. So I thought that was interesting that, even their worst case scenario is not bad. Like, we're a very recession resistant economy in Utah.
Well, and I think as agents, where you get so many questions from your clients of should I buy, should I sell, and they're hearing headlines from across the country, right? You can say, yeah, Utah is very unique. We're definitely feeling some of it, but we're a little insulated in Utah because we have such a strong economy and such a strong job market. And this really shows this Utah being unique.
Yeah. So, and again, this isn't housing, this is kind of their overall look, but now we'll delve into some of the housing numbers. So this is interesting. This shows all the way back to the 70s, right? And each little red bar here represents a quarter. And this is the housing market. So it's year over growth in Utah. So if we're looking at, let's go to here. This data is good through the third quarter of 2022. That's what's hard with all this is the data always lag, right? We're always a few months behind. So, but in the third quarter of 2022, we were still seeing 10% appreciation in home prices. That's pretty remarkable if you think about what happened. Now, it felt like the whole world was falling apart, and we did see price decrease from the peak, right? This 28.3%, which was just bonkers. But what this is saying is that we still saw 10% price appreciation from the third quarter of 2021 to the third quarter of 2022. Okay, so we're not in a housing recession. The market is not going to crash. There's been a correction, right? I mean, this peak was just insane. Like, that's unhealthy for any market. So it's good that it came down. It's good that there was a correction, but we're not in a recession, right? That's not in the forecast. And you can see in Utah, there's been very few times where we've actually seen a prolonged housing recession since the 70s. Like, these little blips, like this one here would probably be considered a recession. I think the Kempsey Gardner Institute defines it as 4 consecutive quarters of depreciation. So here we had like 4, but then it went up and down. So kind of some weird stuff in the 80s. This could be considered a little recession. And then of course, this is the housing bubble burst, right? The infamous 2008 crisis. But besides that, I mean, even though there's these down dips, that still represents appreciation, right? It's just slowing appreciation. It's not depreciation unless it goes negative here. Anyway, I thought that was really insightful that we even though things corrected, we still ended the year up in 2022.
Tyson.
Yeah.
So today, Lawrence Yun, I don't know if that's how you say it, the chief economist for UNAR, wrote something about how the Rocky Mountain region, why we aren't seeing what the rest of the nation is seeing. So it's something that might be useful to share, like real estate agents share why Utah is different than the rest. Because I mean, you see the national news and it's bad, but we're not part of that national news. We're a different little anomaly. And so he even mentioned the Rocky Mountain region, why we're not seeing what the rest of the nation is seeing.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think I have some things later anyway, but yeah, thank you for that. I hadn't read that one yet, so I'll look into that. Okay, this is just some of their highlights and predictions for the year. or what happened, and then a prediction for the next couple of years. So Utah dwelling unit permit. So this is basically when a permit is issued to build a home. These are new builds. So from 2020 to 2021, we saw an increase of 26%. 2021 was a great year for building, record breaking actually in Utah. But then we saw a 26% decrease from 2021 to 2022. And then they're predicting another pretty big decrease over the next year. And then we get back into an increase. So, that's builders being cautious again. But one of the reasons that we will not see a housing crisis in Utah is we still have, the most recent numbers I could find, there's still a 30,000 unit shortage of houses. So demand is still high while supply is low, which is going to push home prices up. Hopefully not at the same rate, that they were a couple of years ago. I don't think we'll see anything that crazy again, just because rates won't drop, to the 2 and 3% range again.
Tyson, what was that? You said it was the most recent, like when was that the last data that you found?
That it was from the Kempsey Gardner Institute, like fourth quarter.
Okay, so pretty recent.
Yeah. Again, all these things lag, so it's hard to get an exact number of where we're at right now. But yeah, it was like fall of last year.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway, so I thought that was interesting that they are predicting kind of another rough year for new builds. Yeah.
Well, that doesn't help. That doesn't help our situation.
It
right?
doesn't,
So builders
no.
are slowing down on building, even though we still have a 30,000 shortage. So like Bliss said in the beginning, we could definitely see, the craziness again of buyers coming into the market. There's not enough inventory, and just, we're our own little economy here in Utah for sure.
Yeah, we are. And it's a good and a bad thing, right? But overall good. I mean, we are in a much better situation housing wise and economic wise, and I think a lot of places in the country. So this next thing I want to compare is the home price index. So it was that bar graph I showed earlier, but here it compares Utah to the US average. And the index number is 1991, represents 100. And so if you look at these numbers, that's what that means. So basically in 2022, a home was almost 8 times more expensive than it was in 1991. In Utah, and you can see how dramatically different that is than the US average. So almost 400. So 4 times more expensive on a national level, almost 8 times
Crazy.
on a Utah level. So percent change. So again, things went up 22%. And then we're still at almost 20% overall from 2021 to 2022. That 10% I showed in that graph before, that was just looking at the most recent quarter. And so this is like the yearly average, this 19.8. And so we can see we're outpacing growth from the US average. And then we look at the projection. So they are projecting a slight decrease this next year, which again is not a bad thing, right? That's a healthy little correction, not a bad thing. And then we're back to the positive by 2024. And then you look at how that compares to the national, it's much better, right? They're predicting a national decline of 5% and then a little one the following year. So I thought that was a really good comparison there. Okay, so now we're going to move into a little bit, how does this directly affect, some of your clients, questions they have. And one thing, I didn't prepare a ton of slides on this because I thought, maybe we could just talk more about if there's any questions. But is the housing market going to crash? I've talked to several buyers just in the past 2 days where that was their main question for me. Like, is it a good time to buy a house? Like, we don't want to buy something and then be upside down the next year. So just a quick reminder, when supply goes down, home prices go up. When demand goes up, home prices go up. So there's an inverse relationship there and with supply. And and we have kind of both issues, right? Builders are slowing down, projected to slow down this year, and people are still demanding housing units. So I found this article. It's a few months old, but it was really good. It was some housing experts chiming in on how they see Utah. So this first one, they're just pointing out that the housing supply is not just Utah specific. Overall, we're looking at about 3.8 million units short, and that's up from 2.5 million in 2018. And then Utah, though, we're actually reducing our shortage. So there were 56,000 units short in 2017, and then now we're at around 31,000. So while the nation on average, that supply deficit is increasing, we've actually been able to reduce ours. Now we'll see how that changes over the next couple of years, but at least we've been headed in the right direction. Okay, so again, as demand goes up, home prices go up. And these are the two things, kind of my predictions. So, and demand's going to increase regardless. So either rates stay where they're at and people get used to it. So that's one of the big reasons that things have dropped off so precipitously, is because rates went up so fast and it shocked everybody, right? But now we're almost 6 months into 7% down to 6%. And so people are, I think, getting used to it. The sticker shock isn't as bad when we put numbers together and show them what a house payment will be.
I think a really important thing that I've noticed too, exactly on your point there, Tyson, is that I've qualified people and they qualify on paper, but then they look at those payments and they're like, oh, peace out. No way. I'm not going to do that. Right. So you just have this bell curve, right? And where this, if rates stay in the mid to upper fives, it becomes the new normal. And then people say, yes, okay, that I do want to do it. I do want to, go ahead and buy a house. It takes a while for that to become the new normal. And I do think people are a little bit hesitant because some people really do think the market's going to crash and they're going to get a great deal. So that's where, us as an industry coming in and educating people is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other scenario is rates do drop significantly and then more buyers come out, right? And then we get competition, which pushes home prices up. So either way, demand will be there. Like Blissa said, I feel like we've both been having more conversations recently with more people, just kind of getting used to the market now and saying, okay, we do want to buy, after the 6 to 9 months of shock on how fast things went up and no way can I buy a house now. It's kind of becoming the norm, and people overall have a short memory. Right? I mean, things go in and out of the news quick, and even the headlines will start to level out and it won't be so doom and gloom, and people will get used to it. So anyway, that's about all I had prepared as far as slides go. And then, I don't know, I guess we probably have a few minutes to.
Well, my thought too is if you have clients that are more technically minded and detail oriented, we're going to post the link to this. This gives them some information to help them really understand it if you want to pass this recording along to them. It depends, what your clients want, but giving them information is not a bad thing, right? Let's help our consumer to feel confident in the decision they make, whether it be to buy a house or to wait, right? We want them to feel good about that decision. So yeah, any questions from anybody on any of this?
I was just going to ask for the slides, but it sounds like you'll send them to us.
Yeah, I can send that out.
Yeah.
Yep. And then one thing.
When do the feds meet next?
March.
It's in March. Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Mid-March.
So we have a little window of time. Can you keep us updated like Monday, Tuesday to see if rates kind of calm down after today's fiasco?
Yeah. Definitely. We'll post something.
Yeah. And what's interesting is we're actually almost exactly where we were today as we were at the beginning of the week, because things got a lot better after the initial announcement, and then today they got a lot worse, and it pretty much canceled each other out. We're almost at the exact same spot we were Monday.
Yeah, so kudos to my clients that locked in yesterday, because honestly, they got between 1/8 and a quarter better yesterday than if they had locked in on Monday or if they'd waited till today. So that's just how the mortgage world works, right?
Yeah.
But
Cool.
we're trending downward, right? I mean,
Mhm.
we've seen it trending slowly downward, like the graph shows, you know.
Yeah.
Hopefully that was the Titanic, and now we're coming back down to smooth waters in the Caribbean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Cool.
And then one thing I will say that I've been mentioning in conversations lately is I've kind of backed off from the narrative of, oh, you can just refinance soon, because that's not a guarantee. Like, as much as I believe that and want to believe that, I don't know that that's the case. So I've been cautious saying that to people. And my script now a little bit is, make sure you're comfortable. Like, don't stretch yourself beyond your means with the plan to refinance in a year, because that's like, truly, that might not happen. It might be longer than that, and we just don't know. So, and I think that goes a long way to show people that you're really invested in them, that you're not just trying to push them into a transaction. So yeah, people, because of that transparency, people might decide to wait, but honestly, I think that goes a long way in building a relationship of trust.
Yeah, and there's a big, the message from the mortgage world, you know, for a while it was date the rate, marry the house, divorce the landlord, right? That got old, and now it's, hey, well, if you do your loan with us, we'll refinance you for free when it goes down. Everybody has those same abilities. It's not a special program to one lender. It really isn't. And so but I love what Tyson's saying. People need to be confident in what they're doing now. We cannot guarantee we're going to lower their payment $300 in 12 months. It could happen. Absolutely, it could happen. And what a great thing that would be. But we don't want to ever people to feel like we're pushing them into something that they're uncomfortable with. So we do spend a lot of time educating.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Any other questions? Okay, well, you guys have been fabulous. We'll get this stuff out there, and feel free to reach out to Tyson or I if you have any clients that you want us to have a conversation with and pre-qualify. We are just happy to do that.
Thank you.
All right, guys, have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.